The story. Let's bring in David Leopold. He chairs the immigration law group at the legal firm of Ulmer Berne. He's also the former president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. David, thank you for joining us. I want to first talk to you about the children. What's the legal context, as far as you understand it, in which the government is detaining them, 15,000?
Look, this is a choice by the government. They can release these children. They can release these families. There are alternative forms of detention if the concern is that they want them to come back for an immigration hearing. And by the way, those alternative forms of detention, like ankle bracelet monitoring and other types of monitoring, are in the high 90s% in terms of effectiveness. So it's a choice of the Trump administration to lock up these families, to lock up these children. It would be cheaper, it would be smarter, and of course, most importantly, it would be more humane and decent to use alternative forms of detention and let these people out of jail.
The family of the Guatemalan girl who died in U.S. custody, obviously, they want answers. How would an investigation like that be handled? Would there be any outside independent groups looking into what happened?
Well, there are any number of ways to do this. The Department of Homeland Security, of course, has an inspector general which could conduct an investigation. If there's been any criminal activity involved, a criminal negligent type homicide, you could have outside investigators look into this. Regardless of how we do this, this does need to be investigated. We need to understand why this child was not given any water for 6 hours after such an arduous journey. And you know, more importantly, or just as importantly, I should say, why? Why did this family have to go across the desert when they could have gone to a port of entry? The problem is the Trump administration has cut off those ports of entry virtually by slowing down the pace of asylum processing to just a few people a day. And that's wrong. That's forcing people to take this arduous, dangerous, horrific journey through the desert to cross between border checkpoints.
David, let's talk about this border wall. Donald Trump has threatened to shut down the government. If he doesn't get the money, that means thousands of federal workers in the U.S. could be without work just days before the Christmas holidays. How likely is that based on what you've seen in the past?
Well, look, with this president, who knows? He has a record of shutdowns. And what we have right now is a president who's up against the wall. The various investigations, criminal investigations, civil investigations, the Mueller investigation, of course, are closing in on him. His tweeting, even as of this morning, is just increasingly desperate, increasingly unhinged. And so what he's trying to do in an act of desperation is play to his base. His anti-immigrant base. And that's what he's trying to do. These are the same people that were impressed when he came down and started his campaign for presidency by calling the Mexicans rapists. This is what he's trying to do. Whether or not the shutdown occurs, look, he owns it. This president, the Republican Party, they own any kind of a shutdown. Senator Schumer, Leader Pelosi, went to his office, went to the Oval Office, and tried to work with him. We're talking about $1.6 billion, which would go to border security. So we're all concerned about border security. But he's fixated on this wall, which is meaningless.
David, you've been following this immigration debate for years. What do you make of the conversation that's being had now, the tone that's being set by this White House? I got a sense from some of your comments, but how do you compare that to, let's say, what we've seen happening in Europe, these protests now in Brussels, for example?
Well, look, you know, I have been doing this a while, and I've never seen anything like it in terms of the level of vitriol, the level of anti-immigrant extremism that comes from the mouths of senior advisors like Stephen Miller, who has allied himself for years with white nationalists and people like that, from the president himself, even from the outgoing chief of staff, John Kelly, and of course the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, who has the audacity to blame this child's death, the young Guatemalan girl, the 7-year-old girl that died last week, to blame that on the parents. So I've never seen such nastiness and such hatred coming from the mouths of an elected official, elected officials, and appointed officials of the administration in such high positions. It's very disturbing. But in the end, you know, the Americans are good people. We're made up of a country of mostly good people. And what's going to happen is immigration is going to go through a cycle, and ultimately we will have a humane and decent immigration system, an orderly and fair system by which asylum can be decided, and an orderly and fair system by which people can come to the United States to contribute. I'm convinced of that.
David Leopold, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us live from Cleveland, Ohio.